Welcome back. If you're here again, it's time for part 2, the reassembly. So we're going to start off exact opposite order for now of where we left off. So we take our extractor spring. There's a flashlight. There's a spot for it to sit right there. Set it in there. I don't grease this spring because this slide is cleaned often and oiled every single time. So this spring gets oil itself. So we're going to put the extractor back in. I'm going to push in with our thumb to line up the hole for the pin. And on reassembly, I always go from the bottom just in case my blow from the hammer misses. I don't destroy my finish. So I'm going to set this in. This comes in mighty handy having one of these, a roll pin holding punch. You can set, even though this isn't a roll pin, it's a solid pin. Focus. Ain't good enough. There. You can set it inside of a roll pin holder punch. It'll hold it for you. This is really weird to do watching the camera. So I'll hold the extractor in place with my thumb. Start it with that. Then I'm going to lightly tap that pin until it grabs the extractor. It's still nowhere near. Focus. There we go. It's still nowhere near being flush, but it is retaining the extractor. So that's where I want it for right now. Then I'll grab a punch, tap it in the rest of the way. I don't like using a hammer on a pin. It'll damage the finish of it. So I just do it very lightly to retain it. Alright. And we're in like Flynn. Not protruding from the top. We're good. If you want to double check it, grab the punch, push on the extractor, and it springs back. Golden. Next, we're going to put in the firing pin block. Its spring just sits in there. I would recommend grease on this part because you don't hardly ever take this out. Even on basic cleanings, even some detailed cleanings, this doesn't come out. Unless you're bringing it to the shop for a full detailed clean, then it will come out. And I'm going to grease it and stick it back in there. I like to use the Lucas Red and Tacky. So the firing pin does have an orientation. So it's going to sit in the channel like that, right there. So you can see right where my thumbs out where the firing pin block's at. It's going to retain this. This is a retaining pin. It's going to let it move that far. So now that you know the orientation, we're pushing in on the block. Okay, the firing pin spring just went past. The firing pin just went past. It's sitting there. Now we want to make sure that this pin is perpendicular. So we're going to rotate it. Too far. Push this in. And there we go. The firing pin block is keeping it from jumping out on us. Now we can start our roll pin. We went out right to left. We're going in left to right. So we'll set that there. I'm just going to lightly tap it to start it. Where did my punch go? There it is. We're going to go in about a quarter of the way so I know it's right up against that firing pin. Sorry, I'm making sure that firing pin's lined up. It's not. It's moved. And I knew that by this little milled section right here on the firing pin. That part stays visible. So we're going to make sure that's straight. We're going to push this in. Okay, and this is where the fun begins. This part is not that easy to do. I'm actually going to sit down. I don't know if I'm in your way. I apologize if I am. But I'm tapping this in until I feel it touch that firing pin. Then I'm going to take another punch and hold that firing pin in. There is an easier way to do this with the frame reassembled, but our frame is not reassembled right now. And I want to go ahead and get the slide done. Okay, just touch the firing pin. Take a punch and push the firing pin in. If I wasn't using a full pin punch, that'd be awesome. Don't know if I'm in camera or not. Okay. Firing pin is in. Touch more. There we go. Now we're going to test the firing pin itself. So put a punch on the firing pin, push in on the firing pin stop. And let me see if you guys can see this. Let me stand back up. So push in. You can see the firing pin sticking out. The stop works. Nothing protrudes. We're golden. Firing pin or slide reassembled as far as that goes. Now we're going to do the frame. First thing we're going to do is the magazine release, which is right here. I am right-handed, so we want the serrations facing to the left. Just going to set it in there. Now this spring is going to be put in there. I like to use a pair of Klein curved handled pliers. So what we're going to do, set this down so I can show you what we're going to do first. We're going to compress the spring just like that and slide it right in. And I missed. So you can see, which is no big deal. We can do it this way too. Got one leg in, one leg is not. It happens. So if you want to do it this way, I got the flashlight in my mouth. So you're going to put the one leg in, lay this flat, bring it up, compress it, drop it in. You'll see. Like that. Sorry. Drop it in. You can see, maybe, there's a cutout in the magazine release. Here. That cutout right there. That's what those legs are going to sit in. Put that in, just push those legs down into it until it sits flush, like that. Now that's sitting flush, we need to add the trigger bar spring, and its orientation is going to be, so the screw that holds that in sits right there, right in between that loop. That loop's going to match that loop, and the points are going to face down. So you're going to compress this slightly this way. Drop it in. Make sure not to scratch your finish, because those little boogers are sometimes kind of sharp on the tip of that spring. Just walking it into that spot. There it sits. So now that that's there, make sure it's lined up like that. Take our screw, set it in, start it by hand, like that. Snug it up with a Graciosa H2, as discussed in the previous video. It is the perfect size. Focus. Maybe. Come on now. Focus right here. Stupid camera. Anyway. It's the perfect size for this. So we're going to put it in. As discussed in the previous video, this screw is usually peened in from the factory. So if you don't have a substantially strong screwdriver that is made exactly for this screw, it's going to either damage the screw or break the screwdriver. So we'll snug that up. You can see no damage to the firearm. That spring has tension. There we go. I moved the spring slightly. And I locked it in place. Make sure everything's snug as a bug. It is. Okay. Next, we're going to reassemble our trigger. So that is going to face up. That spring we just put in rides in that groove there and there. So that's how you get your orientation right. And it goes in the bottom hole of the trigger, not the top one. The top one is the retaining pin and the spring. So grab this pin, you won't need to punch or anything, and just push it right in. Now when I did all my customization, obviously I replaced a lot of the parts, but a lot of the parts are factory, such as this. So I polished this side, because that's where it rubs in the frame. I polished this entire top piece around and the bottom, because that's where it moves inside of the trigger. And I polished it and stoned this to make sure it's flat. That's where it rubs the bottom of the frame underneath of the cage. The hammer hooks right here, like so. And so I also polished the inside where that rubs, just to take out any grit. These are very smooth triggers out of the box, but everything can be improved somewhat when it's been mass produced. So bend it like this and drop it in. Maybe. There we go. It drops in. Now we're going to grab our trigger retaining pin, which is this one. This one doesn't matter left to right, right to left, because it's slightly undersized on the outer diameter, but the inner diameter is what's retained by the pin, or the spring. So we're just going to set that in there. And you'll have to pull down slightly on the trigger, because this spring underneath is already in there ready to go. So I will put this pin in just until it's retaining the trigger, but it's not coming through yet. So next is the trigger return spring. The long leg goes forward. The short leg goes right here. This is the back side of the trigger. This is the beginning of the trigger bar. There's a gap right here. That's where the short leg goes, right there. So short leg is going to go here. The long leg is going to go right here. So the easiest way I have found to do this is using a pair of standard, these are Grace USA, needle nose. Grab it by the loop. Again, I'm going to have to sit down to do this. Bump the camera, sorry. My pin jumped in on me. Now push that pin back out. Because it's in too far. Sorry. So that's where we started. I accidentally bumped that pin in. So needle nose, make sure you got your orientation right. Long leg forward. I like to set it down. I'm sorry, you're probably not going to see this. This is a hard piece to show. So I'm going to put that long leg in that gap I showed you. And leverage this down. Just like that. So I know you guys probably couldn't see that, and I do apologize. But we've got the long leg right here. In this channel, the short leg is down in that gap. And it works. Okay. Now we're just going to push that pin in the rest of the way. It is still sticking out. Hear that little click? That was that spring getting tight around the center of that pin. So now that pin's not going to want to walk out on me when I'm firing. Alright, so we're there. Next, we're going to put the hammer back in. So you're going to go from the top, drop it down, drop the spur down that hole right there. That hook, we're going to set it right over the back of that. And we should be roughly lined up with the hole. And it does go right to left. Remember that pin is slightly bigger. Just like that. Push it in, and we're on. Now we're going to put the retaining pin back in. Where'd that little bugger go? Little guy, little guy, little guy, where'd you go? Oh yeah, just like I told you guys earlier, I set him over here by himself. Take a pair of needle nose. See that hole right there? That's where that's going in. Sometimes magnetized tools are great. Sometimes they're a royal pain in the butt. Oh, come on. Alright, forget the needle nose part. I'm just going to set it in. I don't know if Mark Novak ever sees this, he's going to lose his mind. I just stuck my fingers in front of the camera, and there I am doing it again, but I'm sorry. There's not any good way to show you. There we go. Dropping that pin in there. So it's still sticking up a little bit. That way you guys can see it. And it just slides right down in. There's no pressure on it whatsoever. And it pokes out and just keeps that pin from walking out. That's all it does. It just sets in there. It's a little bit undersized for the hole, which is exactly what you want. This cage is going to sit on top of it like that, which keeps it from coming out. Now the fun part begins. The part that, if you're watching this video, this is the part you're probably here to see, and it's the cage being put back together. I have a bucket of slaves. That is my CZ decocker cage slave. It works on a regular cage too, but don't really need a slave for those. So I'm going to zoom in and try to give you the best possible view of what I'm doing. Alright, hopefully this is a little bit better for you. Sorry you can see a tube of Lucas Red and Tacky, but that is what I am using this to sit on. So for this procedure, you will need a slave pin. You have to have this. There is no other way around this. It's gonna happen. So you need the slave pin, and I like to use, if I can find it, hadn't pulled it out yet, a 1/8 punch, which is roughly that size. Alright, so first things first. I know my hands are going to be in the way, but I will try to show you as much as possible. Alright, so first, I like to work from the left to the right. And we're going to start with our decocker. Its orientation is like that right there. So this little nub is going to face forward. You can tell this is forward. Let's see where the ejector is at. So it's going to sit in there just like that, but on the inside. So I will start my slave. No, this is so hard to do. There we go. I'm reaching around that. That's awesome. Alright. And a lot of this is not luck, but just holding your mouth. Holding your mouth just right. So we're going to start that. Like that. Next, we're going to take the Sear, and its orientation is like this. I'm going to go up from the bottom, and I'll show you why here in a second. But first, I'm just going to hook it onto my slave. Push it over. Okay, so went up from the bottom, and the reason why is it sits like that. So if you go from the top, you're never going to get that lipped into there correctly. So sits right there, and all the way to the side there. Now we're going to put our two springs in. So the spring on this side, it'll have a leg that goes in this track right here, and the underneath side we'll show you how to adjust that in a minute. That'll be the very last thing you do once this cage is together. And then the Sear spring itself is going to go on this side. They're going to sit right beside each other, and its long leg is going to go in this track. Its short leg will be pushing up from underneath on the Sear itself. So the best way I have found to do this is to push the slave about 3/4 of the way through. Take the spring for the decocker, and its orientation is like this. So the piece with the 90 degree, it's going to be underneath. It's going to be facing that way. And the long arm that I just launched into my other hand, the long arm of it is going to be in that smaller groove right there. So what I like to do is just set it in there. Just drop it into the Sear. It's not cooperating. There we go. And grab it with the slave. So you can see it's not where it's supposed to be sitting yet. So we'll adjust it with the pick. There we go. And right there is where it's going to sit. Now, oh, and I misspoke earlier. The leg for the Sear spring is not going to be underneath and on it. It's a short, stubby little thing, and it's going to be pushing from the inside of it, and that'll make sense here in a second. So I like to just set it in there like so. Push down on it slightly. Grab it. Okay, I messed up. I'll show you what I did. That way you know if you messed up. So I was trying to push the Sear spring in there, and I got the small leg past the lip of the Sear. So it's now just dangling on there, and you know this because this long leg is allowed to turn all the way around. So what I need to do is push everything over here where it needs to go. Push the sleeve out just enough to where I can grab this spring, but not lose everything else. And try again. Alright, so the way it's sitting right now is where you want it. You've got your little leg right there, and your long leg in there, and it's obviously too far out right now, but that's fine. What we're going to do is I'm going to be in your way again, but I'm going to take my finger, and I'm going to push down. And while I'm doing that, I'm also going to push with this hand on the slave pin that direction, trying to hook it through. Hear that click? I got it. Mostly. It is retained. Now just take your punch, make any adjustments you need to make. Alright, and our slave is now holding decocker, which turned on me. Did it? Where are you at? It did. Okay. I don't want to redo these two springs. So what I'm going to do is put the sleeve in like that. I'm going to... Oh, that's my problem. I got the bottom lip hooked on top of the Sear. Orientation is right. It's just in the wrong spot. Right there. So maybe, because you really don't want to do this any more than you have to, maybe I can pull the Sear this way enough to get that leg off. Let's try. Got it. Okay. Now that we're in the correct orientation, shove this back over. Now we have our decocker where it sits, have our Sear decocker spring where it sits mostly. We have to adjust the bottom once we're done. We have the Sear spring exactly where it needs to be. So we're going to push our slave towards flush with the Sear. Grab our lifter, which its orientation is like that, with that curve being backwards. We're going to shove the slave through it. Now we've gone a touch too far with the slave. Push it back in a little bit. Last but not least, the beard hair spring, which is the lifter spring. This guy's not hard to put in. There is a slot right here, cut in the lifter. Just drop that little spring in. And I've got the slave still sticking out a little too far. There we go. It'll drop right in. And then from this side, you guys probably cannot see it, but inside that hole, the spring, the bottom loop of the spring is sitting right there. I can grab the pick and pull it down and then push that sleeve in, capturing it, which I just did. We're not fully captured yet. Alright, beard hair spring is in. Lifter spring, sorry, I just have it. Now we're going to make sure, see how it's sticking out. It's going to be probably hard to show too. Right in front of my pick, it's sticking out slightly. It's not in that channel right there. Make sure it's in that channel. Like that. Easiest way to test it. We've got tension. They're almost done. The slave is holding everything in there, but this leg of this spring needs to come over, down, and be hooked like that. So it needs to be behind this leg, pulling it backwards. So there's no, again, it's so small and I have huge hands. There's no great way to show you this, but I'm going to try. So the best way I found is to hook it with another 90 degree. Pull it past that one. So we're past the Sear leg, but we still got to get it past the decocker leg. There we go. So you can see it is now behind this leg, which is giving your decocker tension. So double check the whole thing. Decocker, tension, check. Sear, tension, check. Lifter, tension, check. Rebuilt. That's probably what most of you guys were looking for. So I know let's see, that video was like 20 minutes. We're going to edit it a little bit. So you're probably like 25, 30 minutes in at this point. I don't know for sure. But we're going to stop that. We're going to move the camera and start again. All right, we're back up here. We're almost done. So we got the cage and our slave is holding it together. There is a tab here and a tab here. There's a recess below them. It's going to sit right there. See how that's got a notch cut into it? It hooks onto it on both sides. So this is just going to sit on here. Push down and back. Like that. We know we're lined up. Everything is golden there. This is where the nerve-wracking part comes in, because I've messed this up once and I had to walk away for a minute because I was furious. So, this is the pin that holds this in. It's smaller on this side, so it'll go in right there. We're going to do one quick, rapid smack with a dollar rim hammer. and try to drive this as far in, if not all the way through as possible, without letting any of those springs lose their tension. I've done it once where something caught somewhere, and I launched 2 springs out, and I had to restart the whole process over. So just be aware that does happen. So I'm going to set this here. I'll lift the tension off there. That's where she goes. I'm going to take this and just start it. Alright, we've started because our slave is sitting right there. So now that pin is holding this side. We haven't gotten through any springs yet. So this is where that's our slave poking out. This is the nerve-wracking part. So it's just 1, 2, whap. Like you're just gonna rail it. You got to give that slave somewhere to go too. So 1, 2. We're in. Flush here. The slave just being held in by the frame. So all we got to do is take a punch, push that in the rest of the way. There goes the slave. Ah, victory. So, still tension. Hammer is held. We're good. Yay. Next, we're going to put the decocker back in. So, sorry, no. Little retaining plate for that pin. No great way to show you this because it's a goofy little thing, but it's got a flat side and a round side. The round side goes in first. There's a little slot inside of there that it goes in, and this part is where magnetic tools can come in handy. Sorry. There you go. It just sits there. It's not tight. It's retained by the decocker. So it just sits there so that pin just can't jump out on you. So the decocker, just set it in. Wiggle. We're going to lift. The tip of it is now touching this end of the Sear spring. So we're going to lift up on the Sear spring. Enough to get that past. There we go. Now next, a lot of people think it's just the spring leg holding them. It's not. It's the decocker. So if you're to this point and you can't get it back in, it's this decocker lever. All you got to do is push down slightly. Click. Done. It's all the way in. That pin's retaining it. It doesn't want to come back out. And we are in. It'll move. It'll have some movement in it, but that pin's retaining it. Check function. We're good. Now we're going to put the magazine. There's a spring that keeps the magazine from dropping free, but this is a different one, so it will still drop free. Forget its name. Most people take these things out anyway, or buy this piece because we like our magazines to drop free now. Philosophies have changed since the 75. So that goes in there. We're not going to hook the hook on yet. We are going to keep our finger right here because that pin just sits there. The tension of the spring is what keeps pressure on it. So next, we're going to feed our recoil or mainspring over the spur. That's as far as it's going to want to go in. We're going to set the plug on it in this orientation. That's how it sits inside the gun. what I'm going to do, again, can't really see on camera, but I'm going to turn it vertical. I'm going to push the plug / lanyard loop onto this block, shoving the whole thing inside. While it's inside, I'm going to hook this right there on the end of the magazine, or sorry, magazine, on the end of the recoil mainspring. Jesus, can't talk today. And then drop the pin in to retain the whole thing. So I wish there was a way to show this. I don't really believe there is. So vertical. Alright, the lanyard loop is flush with the bottom now, which means it's much higher compressed than normal. Got that guy bent out. Hear that click? It just went over the loop where it's supposed to be. And we're in. So I'll try to reiterate what I just did. So you can see the top of the plug. What I did was I compressed the loop flush with the bottom, which shoved all this up a lot higher than it should be, which exposed the slot for that hook that's like this to go into. Once I was on there, there's a tiny little slot cut into the frame. It'll release some of your tension. It'll pull this guy into that slot, and you just toss your pin in. If you don't have the lanyard loop on yours, your life's going to be a lot more difficult. Excuse me. Because the lanyard loop is great for assembly disassembly because you can use it to push on something. If you don't have that, you're going to have to use a punch, a big old, what is this, 5/32, to push in on that, and you're going to do it from the side, which means that pin's going to want to fall out on you. So if you don't have a lanyard, I have a jig made that's got a little nub that sticks up, and I use it to push onto the nub when I'm working on CZs that don't have these. So there's that. All we got left to do now is stick our grips back on. We can zoom out. Sorry about the phone ringing. Shop is closed. I'm doing this after hours, but people still want to call. Some gunsmiths or home gamers, do it at homes, whatever you want to call it, they will use magnetic trays or bins to keep all their parts separate. I always preferred using these mats that you can put inside your toolbox, the anti-slip mats. This is a Milwaukee branded one. It came with my big Milwaukee tool chest, and it doesn't actually go inside of it. It just came with it, and it was actually the exact, I didn't have to cut it at all. It was the perfect dimensions for my bench. So I use it, but it's got grit, so you can just set stuff on it and it won't roll away for you. And I like to just make piles. Don't forget, this is a slave. Put it away. I like to just make piles of parts so I know where everything goes, how it goes together. So our final functions check, single action. Never pull the trigger on one of these without the slide on. It's going to smash into that cage, and it will damage it. So, good there. Double action works. Decocker, decocks. Golden. Grab the slide. Put the barrel in. Recoil spring. Slide stop. Full function check. We are good. Put my flashlight back on. Alright. Thanks for watching. Oh yeah, check out the single action. Wall. Yeah. That's how you do it. This works for any decocker CZ75 series. It'll work for several of the clones. As far as like the Phantom, it's the same inside, except for the magazine release spring tension screw. It's got this almost looks like kind of like a sickle sitting on top, and it's got a spring under it. And you got to polish the top of that smooth because it's actually what pushes up on your trigger bar and keeps it pushed up, like those two little ears that were right here. It replaces those with almost like a sickle looking piece, and it's got to be really smooth on top, otherwise you get a lot of grit from your trigger bar and that piece rubbing. But the cage itself, identical. So this works on PCRs, P-01s, anything that says 75D compact, P-01, not the Omega series. The Omegas are completely different inside. This will also work on SP1 Tacticals. It's the same for 75 BDs, you know, just regular, the original old girl. Other than that, hope you learned something. If you didn't, I'm sorry. If you did and you want to see something else, you have ideas for the videos, let me know. Have a good day.